Hello and welcome to SecureWorld Behind the Scenes, our exclusive interview series. This is Tom Bechtold, your co-host for today's program. Thank you all for joining us. Today, Bruce Sussman from the SecureWorld Media team will be talking with Jon Clay, the Director of Global Threat Communications at TrendMicro. Trend recently released their Annual Security Roundup. We'll be listening to Jon give us some of the background on the report and some of the current findings. Before we begin, I'd like to give a brief introduction to today's guest. Jon Clay is a cybersecurity expert with over 22 years of experience in the industry across a range of areas, including sales engineering, training, product marketing, PR media, evangelist, public speaking, and management. And next up, we'd like to acknowledge, of course, Bruce Sussman, my co-host, Director of Digital Content. He'll be doing the majority of our interview today. Bruce, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Tom. And Jon, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to talk about the new 2018 Security Roundup from TrendMicro. And I like the title of it, Caught in the Net, Unraveling the Tangle of Old and New Threats. And if that isn't true, I don't know what is. So let's dive right in. And Jon, I think the thing that our listeners probably want to know most is which type of attack vector surged in 2018. What did your research discover?
Yeah, Bruce, and thanks for having me today. I always love talking about these topics with you guys. So, yeah, what vectors really increased last year, what we saw was messaging attacks, socially engineered attacks, where the threat actors have shifted their tactic and are starting to look at how I can improve my infection rates. And one of the things that they have seen, and we've definitely seen over the years, is that socially engineered attacks against employees works, and it works pretty well. And so they really have moved towards that type of an attack vector, and especially using the messaging layer. So messaging-based attacks. They're also looking at credential stealing attacks of email-based accounts. So we saw a huge increase in Office 365 attacks, credential phishing attacks. So the employee would receive an email, then they would open up an attachment. The attachment then also ultimately would pop up an Office 365 login screen. And the employees would then log in thinking it's their corporate login account, and the criminals would be able to steal their login credentials. Obviously, once they have that person's email account, they can phish, they can send spam emails, they can do whatever they want with that account. So that was one of the main things that we saw increased. The second one attack that we saw increase was cryptocurrency mining. This was an area that we had actually seen a lot of chatter in the underground communities back in 2017 talking about it. The actors were communicating between each other in a bunch of forums, and they were asking, how to do it, what types of systems are best supporting cryptocurrency mining, et cetera. And so that definitely surged in 2018. In fact, it was one of the biggest increase in threats that we saw. And then the last one that's been utilized by the threat actors is fileless-based attacks, script attacks. These are threats that don't have a file associated with them. That's why they're called fileless. And it also means that it's one that is a little more difficult for a lot of security firms to identify because there is no file, right? It's in memory. It's running in the processes of the system. So it's a little more difficult to detect. And so as such, the threat actors, we started to see a big increase in the use of this type of an attack in 2018 as well.
Okay, yeah, I figured there had to be a number of categories that were surging, and thank you for that overview. One of the other things that I know TrendMicro has focused on a lot is research around IoT and IIoT. What does the attack space look like there, based on what you were seeing or what you uncovered?
Yeah, Bruce, it's a great topic and an area that we have a lot of concern around. In fact, we just published today a new research report on Industry 4.0 and threats against Industry 4.0, which is primarily the industrial IoT, or the IIoT space. And, the big thing we're finding in this space is the use of outdated software, outdated operating systems, especially in the manufacturing space. Lots of even XP still running in those spaces. And so the threat to these industrial IoT organizations and smart factories is probably the biggest one, is the use of outdated software. As such, they're going to have vulnerabilities associated with them, which may not even be patchable because they're unsupported operating systems, right? XP is unsupported by Microsoft now. So any vulnerability introduced today that can work in an XP operating system is not going to be fully patched. So that's a big one that we're going to see. Secondarily, on the IIoT, the devices themselves, again, are typically, especially in industrial IoT, the devices are old. They may have been produced, 10 years ago. And again, you're going to introduce vulnerabilities across those period of times that may not be patched and may not even ever be patched. I call those forever days. Instead of 0 days, they're forever days. And so the biggest threat, in our opinion, in this space is outdated operating systems, outdated applications running on these devices, and outdated firmware even within these devices. So organizations need to look at that and understand that those outdated systems, outdated operating systems, have to have some type of patch. And that's where virtual patching, IPS, network-based IPS, can help them and potentially block exploits targeting those devices.
Wow, well, I am amazed at that term, forever days, and I love the term. I think that's great that you labeled that. Of course, it's got a scary connotation, but that's a good label on that one. Thank you. One of the other things that I had come across in the report, and I can't remember the exact number now, but you had this incredible statistic on the millions of threats blocked in 2018. What was that exact number, if you know it, or close? And how are you able to measure so many threats? Because I was a little blown away by that.
Yeah, in fact, it was 48 billion threats that we blocked that were targeting our customer base last year in 2018. And so, yeah, it's a massive number. The majority of that were messaging-based threats, spam, phishing, spear phishing attacks that we saw. A lot were tied to web-based attacks. So as your viewers who are listening to this, probably the best place to block an attack today, if you wanted to preempt an attack on your endpoints or your employees, is look at your messaging layer, looking at your web layer, and providing protection at those layers. So your improved messaging security, improved web security will block the majority of the threats coming into your organization. So yeah, that is a big one. The other one, though, is files have continued to increase. We're seeing file-based threats still increasing year over year.
Okay, what about ransomware? Because I moderate a number of panels at our SecureWorld conferences across North America, and last year it was conventional wisdom that ransomware, as far as the numbers, was on the decline. What did your research find?
Yeah, Bruce, we also saw a decline in ransomware attacks overall. So ransomware attacks against our customers were down. Also, the number of ransomware families that we identified was also down year over year. Now, not to say ransomware is completely eradicated. We've definitely seen some recent ransomware attacks in the news. But the tactic that the criminals are using, who they are targeting, is shifting a bit. They're going much more targeted in their approach to ransomware, looking at organizations that have critical business systems that they could utilize ransomware to attack, organizations that if any of their systems get encrypted and are brought down for any period of time, it's going to cause them pain. And so they're targeting those type of organizations, which also allows them to increase their ransom demands. Because if I have critical systems that are taken offline due to ransomware, the likelihood that I will pay the ransom to get them back online quickly is much higher. We've seen just in the recent news that some organizations, it's taken them weeks to rebuild their systems and bring them back online. As such, that's a lot of pain. Therefore, organizations might be more induced to pay a premium ransom in those cases. So for sure, we're going to see ransomware drop, and it's going to continue to drop in 2019 this year, but it will be more targeted. It will go after organizations. Small businesses also tend to be more prone to catastrophic results of a ransomware attack. They still may not have implemented some of the protections that they need or put together improved backup processes in order to recover from an attack much more quickly than they should in the past. So we'll still see small businesses targeted more as well.
Yeah, it's interesting all the developments in that ransomware space, because sometimes it's talked about like, oh, it's on the way down, but as you point out, the destruction, all the decisions on paying versus not paying. And I even saw somebody say recently that they've seen insurance companies, in some cases, advising their clients, pay the ransom because it's going to be cheaper to do so. So there's a lot of factors there. It's very fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say the last thing on ransomware, Bruce, and one of the reasons we have seen a decrease in ransomware is the improved protection and detection capabilities coming out from the security industry. The use of artificial intelligence and machine learning has improved our ability to detect new ransomware families as they come out, without even having to do updates. And so that has improved our ability to detect ransomware, which means the threat actors behind it are seeing less ability to infect organizations. So, but again, unless you have implemented those new technologies into your security stack and improved your processes around recovery of an attack, if it does get through, you still could be at risk of a ransomware attack in the future.
Very good points. Thank you for that, John. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, in a nutshell here, you've covered some of the surging attack vectors, kind of the state of IoT, and also ransomware and what's happening in that space. What did these things tell us about the approach organizations should consider to protect themselves as we go through 2019?
Yes, and the tried and true multi-layered security structure is still the best way to go about it. Making sure you have protection for your cloud-based assets. Make sure you have protection at your gateway through your email messaging layer, your web layer. All of that is covered. Make sure you have network-based security in place, looking at network IPS, looking at network traffic scanning, making sure your endpoints, including your servers, are covered. And even at each of those layers, you want to have multiple technologies in play to be able to detect. So at your endpoint, you want to have web reputation scanning, so making sure that you're protected against any web-based attacks that could come in, drive-by downloads, malvertising, any of that stuff. You also have machine learning at all of these different layers, and artificial intelligence now implemented in many of these different layers. So that full breadth of protection is going to be key. The other thing you need to do as an organization is make sure you have the ability and a process in place in case you are attacked and there is a successful attack against you. You need to be able to recover as quickly as possible. So that's going to be critical, that you have a plan and you work through that plan on a regular basis to ensure if something should happen, you have the ability to do that recovery process as fast as possible.
Well, that is fantastic, and that's a very good point. You've got to plan, right? A failure to plan is planning to fail, as they say. So thank you so much.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. Really appreciate your time and your insights, and we'll be sure and post a link to the actual study, to the 2018 Security Roundup, and what all you were able to find. In the meantime, I will turn it back over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Great questions. Thank you, John, for taking the time to share your expertise with us and talk about the report. Great information, some very strong tips there, so hopefully folks are taking note here and can start doing some of this stuff within their company or exploring the options within their organizations. Be on the lookout for future behind-the-scenes interviews with our media team. On behalf of the SecureWorld Digital team, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and participation today.